Hey guys, it's Mountain Walk, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about Stompy. That's right, we got another pre-modern deck, because I've been thinking about this format for a while, and I was like, oh man, got so many decks I wanted to make and play and all that kind of cool stuff. So I was like, well, I probably should just put another one out there. Again, I chose this one specifically because um, I thought it'd be interesting to show decks that were not exactly what is being like from the admittedly, obviously, limited coverage of pre-modern. I was looking for decks that would are a little bit off the beaten path, or at least just ones that aren't as popular or that I've seen really played anywhere. Um, so yeah, that's probably what I'll probably keep doing because um, other decks are like pretty obvious, like Landstill and Sly and stuff. Like, so those decks are a little less interesting because they've gotten a lot of exposure. Most people have played with variants of those decks in most formats. So I want to try something a little bit different. So here we go. So what is this? What is this deck? Well, it's an old deck from extended from gosh, I think it was right around when late 90s sometime, mid late 90s, yeah. Because it was really around like Tempest block and Saga block when you got like a ton of like really efficient green dudes that really sort of made the deck like really good. Rancor especially is a big one. Um, Basically all it is just like piles of one drops and uh, pump spells, and you pretty much only want stuff at one, basically. Um, you want to be super fast. And it's just a mono green deck. You never really ever splash. Well, you never splash anything because you're trying to be super efficient. So you don't have any of the sort of the mana issues of getting color screwed. Just check out the wrong colors or whatever. So it's just mono green. Um, and it's a kind of an interesting deck. Maybe not like interesting as in like it's a green deck with creatures, but you get to play a little bit like play creatures that you don't really play in most other decks. Something like Riverbow is kind of an exception where that was a fairly popular creature back in the day. Um, but yeah, obviously Wild Dogs, not something that you typically see, or something like a Gazban Ogre or whatnot. Those are typically not all-star green cards you see in 10 out of 10 decks. It's basically one of those old uh, monocolor aggro decks, the ones that were like, just focused on being consistent and aggressive and just doing their thing. Nothing too fancy for the most part. Um, and this Green's entry into that sort of style of deck. And pump spells, lots and lots of pump spells. I mean, when was the last time you cast Giant Growth and it wasn't in a limited format? I don't think I ever have. No, I'm sure I have. Gosh, I can't think of a deck that's used it really off the top of my head. I guess Infect, but Infect didn't use Giant Growth. It used like, well, obviously like Vines of Vastwood and stuff like that. So this is something that you can really get to play new and interesting stuff. So what's the deck look like? Looks like this. Basically, you got a bunch of dudes, whole bunch of dudes. You got your pump spells, and you got your mana stuff. Some of this is, well, probably doesn't need too much of an explanation. Land grant is because basically acts more or less like a land, and late game it can be pitched to like Vine Dryad or Bounty of the Hunt. Same thing with Elder Spirit Guide. It gives you your explosiveness, so you can play, your double one drops on turn one, or even late game, of course, it doubles as a dude. I'm sure we've all played Simian Spirit Guide before, so it functions just like that. Late game dork, except this one obviously is a little bit better, because boy, that thing's sweet. I love it. I freaking love Elvish Spirit Guide. That's a sweet card. In the sideboard, we've got stuff like Naturalized Crypts, Null Rod, Hidden Gibbons. Hidden Gibbons. I'm trying not to make any puns. I'll do my best. Um, Rushwood Legate, that's obviously against blue decks, and Root Maze, again, helps function as basically another, helps with the Winter Orb, good against certain decks. Um, it's pretty, it could be like a fourth Winter Orb or something, but it's a little bit cheaper. Um, I mean, there's tons of different sideboard options, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Elvish Lyrist, that's basically here because there's just tons and tons and tons of enchantments that can really get your goat, or in this case, your Rogue Elephant. That didn't go over as well as I thought. Okay, so you got stuff like Survival of the Fittest, Recurring Nightmare, Pernicious Deed, Oath of Druids, um, Oversold Cemetery or Oath of Ghouls. I mean, all the Enchantress decks, all sorts of other hateful, mean enchantments. And this guy can come out, or girl, I guess, can come out before those things land, and can really put the beating on them. Also, obviously good against the Illusions of Grandeur. I almost forgot that one. That was a big one too. Um, so this is pretty sweet. So it's about your only piece of utility really. Um, I said Winter Ward, which is just there to punish other decks. Good against a lot of the slower decks or mana hungry things. But yeah, this is pretty easy. I mean, nothing too wonky. You know, if you're expecting a deck with a lot of low mana costs, high power attacky dudes, this would all nothing too strange. Queer Arm Ranger also helps with mana too. Also plays around Winter Orb, which is really nice, for obvious reasons. Uh, yeah, right. So Riverbow is like the only 2-cast creature. That's mostly because, well, obviously you don't want all 1 drops, or excuse me, you don't want too many like higher drop stuff. But Riverbow has evasion against the blue decks, which is really nice, and also can regenerate. So it makes it a pretty good target for pump spells, or obviously something like Rancor. Um, yeah, so that's totally an acceptable card. So it gives you a little bit more staying power, but watch out for Incinerate or Swords or other stuff that doesn't let it regenerate, which is a lot. Okay, but it's wonderful though, so pretty great. Okay, so yep, the strategy here is pretty simple. You just play dudes and beat down. I mean, obvious like play around sweepers and stuff if you expect that kind of thing. Again, nothing too weird, too strange. You just want to use your pump spells to, I mean, obviously to deal them more damage, but to get ahead in creature combat, or protect your guys from burn. And if you're playing against this deck, you'd want to be sure to, just like Infect, you want to burn them, their creatures, on your turn, so they don't get the extra damage from the pump spells in addition when they attack you. So they have to waste them more or less. Rancor is sweet. Man, this card is so good in this deck. It gives turn even like, anything into like a pretty solid threat. So that's pretty sweet. Obviously, and the trample's really nice, because, well, I mean, I guess that's obvious, but it helps you push through damage, especially with all the pump spells. So trample's really good here. So no damage is wasted, so that's very nice. And Bounty of the Hunt is awesome. It's the green entry into the Alliance's pitch spells, which was Force of Will, uh, well, obviously, Pyrokinesis, which is, well, awesome. Contagion, again, another amazing card. Even without Necropotence to fuel it, this card, Contagion, is pretty sweet. I like it a lot. And green one, of course, Bounty of the Hunt. And the white one is Scars of the Veteran or something. Ooh, I might have to look that one up. It's garbage though. I think it has something to do with like preventing damage or moving counters or something. I don't know. It's not very good. But all these cards have sweet art. Look at Bounty and Hunt. That's sweet art. Rancor, sweet art. Wild Dog, sweet art. I mean, Elvish Lyrist, sweet art. It's all sweet. It's all sweet. Giant Growth, it's Dragonfly. What more do you want? Um, Winter main deck, because typically these things were seen in the sideboard. That's mostly just, well, obviously it just makes everyone have to play your game, but it's definitely there for any of the like board control decks or any of the slower decks that have a lot of removal. This should help a little bit with that. You could replace it. I'm not exactly sure if it's better main deck or sideboard, but you could replace it with more stuff like Seal of Strength or different guys like Pouncing Jaguar, which I'm not actually. On a slight side note, I think Pouncing Jaguar might be good enough for main deck. Obviously, multiples are a little clunky, but you can always pitch them to Vine Dryad or Bounty the Hunt. Not 100% sure. It doesn't die to Mog Fanatic too, which is kind of nice. So I'm not 100% sure about that. But Pouncing Jaguar is another one that I'm thinking like would be pretty sweet, but I haven't played with it in this deck yet. So uh, something to consider. Or of course something more pump spells like Seal of Strength, which I like more than was it Briar Shield? It's the one where you play it on the creature, gets a +1/+1, and then you sack it for +3/+3. I mean, I don't think you can play that many auras, or at least because Rancor comes back if it resolves on the creature and the creature dies, whereas Briar Shield just opens you up too much. Just it feels bad, especially since there's swords in this format, so it doesn't really matter how big your dude gets, or something like Edict or Smother or whatnot. So yeah, I don't think Briar Shield's very good. Seal Strength is pretty solid. You could play it early to curve out, which is kind of nice, sort of like Seal Fire, which is also one of my favorite awesome cards. Man, I love Seal Fire and Seal Strength. But I'm thinking Winter Orb's a little bit better main deck because it's a little better than all that additional redundancy. And of course, you don't really want to draw too many pump spells, because that can be pretty bad if you don't draw enough dudes. Okay, so deck is fast, pretty fast. Obviously, any of the Elvish Spirit Guide starts where you got two power creatures on the first turn, pretty good. So anything that draws maybe just a little bit badly or misses a step or something, you can really give it to them. Unfortunately, if you don't kill them fast enough, then it's looking kind of bad for you. Obviously, this deck has no real way to to really get any cards back for the most part. But that's okay. The deck is supposed to just be super aggressive and put the onus on your opponent. Decks with a lot of removal can be a problem. Winter Warp does mitigate the super removal heavy decks, which tend to be more like board control decks and stuff, or just regular, blue-based control decks. Winter Warp is pretty good against that kind of stuff, so be sure to time it right. But yeah, it's bad. They play a bunch of removal and start trading 1 for 1 at, or X for 1 with their rafts and stuff. That's a problem. Also, probably the worst one is Powder Keg. It only costs 2 mana, and then it takes just 1 turn, gets it up to 1, and then they can just, slow roll you or whatever with it by just, casting spot removal and just having Keg sit there on 1 counter and then just using it, making you have to overcommit or something. But yeah, Powder Keg's pretty bad. Watch out for that. But again, there's not always going to be a lot you can do. The deck doesn't really interact very much. The Elvish Lyrist is there to deal with stuff like, obviously, all the cards I mentioned previously. So it does give you a little bit of utility, but mostly you're just beaten down. So if your opponent's not playing creatures that you can smash up against and win against in combat with your pump spells, you can't get those sweet Bounty of the Hunt blowouts when they block, and it's like, oh, does he have it, does he not have it? So I can really maybe make them block poorly or change their decisions, which is sweet. But yeah, if they aren't doing typical I want to beat with creatures stuff where your creatures are pretty great, that's gonna probably be an issue. So that's what your sideboard's for, obviously. Again, this format, a lot of really powerful hosers. Just think about having Perish cast against me. It's just like, ugh, just depressing. It even kills your River Boa. That's terrible. Just terrible. Yeah, Perish, Dystopia, Hibernation. Lots of not very nice cards to play against. Yeah, there's not really much you can do here. I just hope they don't have it. Just try and beat them down as fast as you can. Um, the deck is basically solved. Like I said, there are a few cards you could play. You might be able to play Hidden Gibbon's main deck or Hidden Herd or whatever. Um, but the main deck's mostly solved. The sideboard you can do a lot though, obviously. So there's the aforementioned hidden cards, you know, or there's obviously, naturalize and stuff like that. Something like Sylvan Library might be worth exploring. Maybe main deck or sideboard. It is another 2 mana card, but it does draw you a bunch of stuff. So Sylvan Library might be something to play main deck or sideboard. But like I said, you can't really play too many of them. You could probably play single copies somewhere. Not sure where, but somewhere sideboard or maybe even main deck would be fine. Obviously, it's pretty good when you're a super aggressive deck. And just hitting them super hard, and your hand goes empty. You can, draw an additional 2 cards, keep playing threats and stuff. So that could be something to look into. Also, Compost, something pretty good sideboard. Curse Totem, again, good against decks with lots of decks, stuff like the Hermit Druid decks, because obviously they need Hermit Druid to activate for that to work, as well as stuff like Morphling and Masked depending on how prevalent they are. It's obviously good against them. Which obviously doesn't let Masked regenerate, which is good. It does affect your guys a little bit. Obviously, your Riverboa can't regenerate. Queer Arm Ranger doesn't get like any fun tricks, that kind of thing. So just be aware of that, but it's not a big deal usually. Gosh, there's just like a whole bunch of cards you can use. So that's kind of good. So you can actually deal with quite a bit of stuff. Obviously, you have no way to interact with the stack. But most of the decks, a lot of them play permanents and stuff you need to deal with or whatnot. So that's kind of nice. So you do get a little bit more flexibility in the sideboard, but again, just be careful. You don't want to overboard, because obviously you need a bunch of dudes to beat down, and you don't want to board in too many 2 mana cards. So maybe even something like Emerald Charm's a little better, but obviously you miss the ability to hit out on artifacts. So it's, give and take. Give and take. I couldn't resist. I'm sorry. I did it. I did a pun. I did a Hidden Gibbons pun. Give and take. Ah, man. This game's sweet. So, that's basically it. Pretty simple deck. I like playing with this kind of stuff. I mean, you can really just beat down and smash with guys and play like super hyper aggressively, which I think is pretty cool, pretty fun. I like that kind of stuff. I like playing with all these cool little cards, and you can put your Rancor on your Wild Dogs and go to town. That's pretty sweet. I mean, yeah, that kind of speaks for itself. I think it's pretty sweet. I like it a lot. And you get to, oh my gosh, since it's a monocolor deck, you can match the color of the cards, which is green obviously, to your sleeves, which is again amazing. Freaking nothing better than that. That's freaking awesome. That's right. So that's pretty much it, guys. So thanks for stopping by. Oh, and have a wonderful Christmas season. Holidays are pretty stressful for a lot of people. I know that's for sure. So just do your best, keep your head up, and also Rancor your Riverboas. Pretty please. All right. Thanks for stopping by. Bye.